Hello, and welcome to a series of podcasts called Journeying to the Real. Journeying to the Real is about a spiritual quest. So, in a series of podcasts, we will explore the poetry offered in the album Journey to the Real by Cubic Wisdom that you can listen to on Spotify or iTunes or other media. My name is Nüket Kardam. I wrote and recited the poetry in the album Journey to the Real. I have been a student of Sufism, the mystical tradition of Islam, for many years. My poetry was inspired by this practice, learning from the teachers that I've studied with over the years, and ultimately from Mevlana, Jalaluddin Rumi, and Ibn Arabi, the most precious two guides of the tradition. So each episode will consist of questions that I will pose, inspired by a particular poem. And I will offer my interpretations as well as drawing from other writers and poets. And I will finally suggest some practices to you, the listeners, for deepening your own spiritual quest, your own creativity. In other words, we're all in this together. So let's explore more deeply each of the poems in the album Journey to the Real by Cubic Wisdom. And we will start with the first piece called Aroma. And I will pose questions such as, how does focusing on aroma or our sense of smell or on fragrance enhance our lives? Does aroma bring news from the unseen? But before we do that, I would like to briefly discuss how this album came about with Amir Etimatzadeh, together with him, and how I started to write poetry. Some of you may think that writing poetry is not your thing, or that you're not creative in that way. Well, so did I. Writing poetry was as far from my world as possible until 3 years ago. I was a professor of political science and international relations for many years. I was trained to think rationally, formulate hypotheses, find evidence to support them, to reach conclusions, and so on. There's nothing wrong with that, but I felt like something was missing. Since childhood, I was interested in the big questions. Why are we here? What's this universe about? Is there God? That led me to study philosophy first, but it turned out philosophy posed even more questions than answers. And more importantly, it turned out that the answers I was seeking could not be found in books. I thought that if I would read as many books as possible and synthesize what they said, I could come up with answers. But most of the time, what I found was that the authors were trying to upend each other, tell us what the previous author lacked, and how their particular book or article would remedy this lack. Why political science? Well, it was for me a way to find out what's going on in this world. And since then, I learned it really is not a science. Anyway. But I became interested in questions such as, what is that thing we call power? Who has power? I enjoyed my profession, but somehow I still felt unbalanced. One day, in my mid-40s, I was invited to a Sema ceremony in Santa Cruz, California. An American Sufi teacher had invited Mevlevi dervishes and musicians from Konya, Turkey. Mevlevi dervishes are people who follow the path of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, or Rumi as he's known in the West. This was in 1995. The rest is history, as they say. So the poetry I offer flows from years on this path, falling and getting up again, stumbling over and over again, looking inside, just trying to be a human being. My poetry is a small attempt to share this experience, to live the teaching, not just let it remain in the books I read or in the words of the teachers I listen to, but to let my imagination loose, to delve into the arts, into music, into poetry. Perhaps find a way to integrate the rational thought processes I had been trained in with the functions, the five senses, the feelings, the imagination. So I turned to music, especially the music of the region, the Middle East, and was led to a wonderful teacher, originally from Iran, called Amir Etimatzadeh. And I started taking bendir and frame drum lessons from Amir. It turned out that Amir was a different kind of teacher. He strove to bring out the talents in his students and encourage them to experiment. So first he says to me, "Why don't you sing some ilahis, mystical songs, to accompany your drumming?" So I did, but it turned out that I had a terrible singing voice. But that gave me another idea. One day I just wrote down a poem and recited to the rhythms that Amir taught me. I did not sit down to write a poem, but it came, and I was just inspired to put down the words. Would you like to hear it? Here it is. Journey to the Real. I took my thoughts, my worries, strategies, plans, aches, pains, and put them in a basket. They came out and swung from one tree to another, asking, "Who am I? Am I this? Am I that?" Stripped of them, I went deeper. There I became naked. Surprisingly, I no longer worried. There is where I felt most real, tied to the real. Here was a road that was straight, where the notes were emerald. The moment was unique. The knowing was not my knowing, where I played drums, but it wasn't me. The moment was just as it should be, no more, no less. The wind, the rudder, the ocean, the hand that held the rudder had all become one. So why aroma? The sense of smell. Even though all our five senses, touch, smell, taste, hear, see, are important, for me, the most important one is smell. I think it has something to do with my name. My name, Nuket, actually means aroma in Arabic. And it has something to do with my beloved grandfather, Dr. Kilisli Rifat, who gave me this name. I never met him in this life, but he apparently wanted a daughter, and the daughter was going to be named Nuket. So my father gave me this name in his memory. So Nuket means aroma in Arabic. Arabic is a very complex, deep language, so that this word has multiple meanings. The root letters of N, K, and H, nuket, have to do with to blow, to breathe, fragrance, as well as taste. Smell is the oldest of our senses, responding in humans to chemicals in the air. Olfactory hairs filter air moving through the nasal passageways in the nose, scientifically speaking. But smell is also related closely to survival responses and emotion. It affects emotional memory, sexuality, and gut feelings. This poem starts with exploring the sense of smell. Do we pay attention to the smells around us? Where do these smells take us? So I started with the first 5 lines. The fresh smell of the apple on the tree. The warm smell of the bread baking in the oven. The salty smell of the waves hugging the beach. The seductive smell of the rose. Draw me inside. It seems to me that smell takes us deeper. The sense of smell takes us from the visible to the invisible. Many Sufi poets have pointed out how fragrance leads us towards the divine. In other words, fragrance, smell, is a metaphor for that search, for that spiritual search, for that yearning. You could also say that the 5 senses, smell, taste, touch, hear, taste, they are raw materials for the intellect, imagination, fantasy, and reflection. They're so important because they dispense bounties to spirit-based faculties which use them to function, to have a mental life. Many poets from the Sufi world and others too have mentioned the importance of fragrance leading us to the divine. For example, here is a couple of lines from Hafiz. Ah, smell how west wind wafts her musk through the tavern door. Now feel our pumping hearts beat fast. Watch our fears unwind. And from Rumi, as translated by Coleman Barks, here are a few lines. From the hundreds of times I lost the connection, I learned this. Your fragrance brings me back. Inside that, I become a feast today of aloes wood burning, the pure empty sky around the moon. Smell. Smell takes us deeper. It can take us from the visible to the invisible. So the next few lines in my poem, fragrance brings news from the unseen. My nose pulls me like an invisible rope, and I follow. I take 1 step towards you, you take 10 towards me. So here there's a sense that the divine is waiting for us to take that first step, that the divine is always here waiting. So what is it that impedes us? What prevents us from going deeper, even though we're pulled toward the divine? Why do we waste our time with gossip, this word, this letter? So the last section of my poem alludes to the impediments that block us. So here are the lines. Fragrance brings news from the unseen. My nose pulls me like an invisible rope, and I follow. This gossip, this word, this letter blocks the apple on the tree, but its aroma is present. Yes, its aroma is always present. That's the good news, isn't it? All right, let me finish with a few suggestions on how we can perhaps deepen our experience of smell. How we can do that on an everyday basis. Are you ready? So, here's one suggestion. How about taking a slow walk in a garden and smelling everything around us consciously? Let's just focus on what we smell. So I use the following exercise called awareness continuum as I do this walk, and I will suggest the same to you if you like it. It consists of bringing my thoughts, my feelings, my imagination, my sensations, such as touch, hear, see, taste, to bear on what I'm smelling. So while I'm taking a walk in a garden, let's say, in a rose garden, let's say, I become aware of smelling the roses in this garden. Now I'm aware of imagining being a rose. What does being a rose feel like? I have thorns too. Wait, I have a beautiful fragrance and yet have thorns? What does that mean? I am now aware of thinking about planting roses myself. I'm aware of remembering my visit to the rose garden in Portland, Oregon with friends, which leaves me with a feeling of warmth and happiness. And now I'm aware of touching the soft petals of the rose. They're so thin, so exquisite, so beautiful, so divine. So when I return from my walk, I might want to write down this experience in my journal. And if you keep a journal, you might like to write down this experience, and it will help deepen your experience of smell. So that's one suggestion. Another might be, do you like cooking? So for example, you might try cooking with a different set of herbs than you usually do. So really pay attention to the fragrances in your cooking and as you eat. Or do you like journaling? If so, you might write a short reflection about a smell that links you to your childhood, to your ancestors, to your place of birth, maybe. Yes, my friends, we have come to the end of this podcast. I hope that this poem has excited you, perhaps suggested a new way of approaching your sense of smell, a new way of imagining the various connections of smell to your imagination, to your feelings, to your lived experience in general. Looking forward to being with you at our next podcast, exploring the second poem in Journey to the Real, called Secrets of Silence. Stay tuned for an exploration of this next piece of Journey to the Real. Our question will be, what secrets does silence bring? So for now, goodbye, be well, and enjoy smelling the roses. One last thing, I would like to remind you that you can find our album, Journey to the Real, on Spotify or iTunes, and you can listen to the podcast on Spotify or your favorite app. And if you want to purchase the CD, the poetry CD, please go to www.amirschoolofmusic.com. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye for now.